I still remember the first time I tried to speak English. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, and all I managed to say was hello. That's it. One word, a simple greeting, and I was so nervous I could barely look the other person in the eyes. English has always felt like this big, mysterious world. One that's just out of reach for someone like me, a 20-year-old university student from a small town in Mexico. But recently, I decided it was time to take that step, no matter how scary it seemed. So here I am, ready to take on 12 weeks of English classes. Growing up, English always seemed like a distant language. Sure, I'd see it in movies, hear it in songs, or even come across it on social media, but it felt like it belonged to another world. My world was small, safe, and comfortable. My family, my friends, my little town. Everything I know and love is here. But at the same time, I'm in university now, and I know that learning English is essential if I want to reach my goals. English isn't just a language anymore. It's an opportunity, a door that could lead me to so many new things. And that's why, despite my fears, I signed up for these classes. It hasn't been easy. I'm nervous about how much there is to learn. The words sound so different, and sometimes I feel lost, like I'm swimming in an ocean with no end in sight. But I'm not the only one in this class, and seeing other people like me, people with the same fears, the same hesitations, makes it feel a bit easier. I think we're all here with a mixture of excitement and nerves, wondering what we'll be able to say and understand after 12 weeks. My teacher, Miss Laura, seems kind and encouraging. She told us that learning English isn't about becoming perfect overnight. It's about progress, not perfection, she said. You'll get there one word at a time. I don't know if she knows how much I needed to hear that. I've always been hard on myself, expecting to get things right from the start. But maybe this journey isn't about that. Maybe it's about showing up, trying my best, and allowing myself to make mistakes. As I stand on the edge of this journey, I feel a little like I did the first time I rode my bike as a kid. I was scared, but I wanted to try, and even though I fell a few times, I eventually got the hang of it. I want that same feeling with English, a sense of freedom, of confidence. These next 12 weeks are going to be challenging, and I know I'll feel lost at times. But with each class, I hope to find myself a little closer to speaking, understanding, and even enjoying English. So here goes. One word at a time, one lesson at a time. My English journey starts now. Week 1, Finding My Voice. Week 1. I took a deep breath before entering the classroom. My first English class. It felt like stepping into another world. I could hear other students talking nervously, some in Spanish, others attempting broken bits of English. Everyone seemed a bit anxious, just like me, which made me feel less alone. Miss Laura, our teacher, greeted us with a big smile, saying, "Hello, class." We all echoed her, but the word hello felt strange on my tongue. It's just a simple word, but saying it in front of people made me feel exposed, as if everyone could see how new I was to English. Miss Laura introduced herself slowly, emphasizing each word. "My name is Miss Laura," she said, pointing to herself. "I am your English teacher." She asked each of us to introduce ourselves in English, just like she did. When it was my turn, I felt my cheeks heat up. "My name is Lucy," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. But Miss Laura smiled warmly and nodded as if I'd just given a speech. That made me feel a little braver. Next, she taught us a few simple phrases, like, "How are you?" and "Nice to meet you." It was strange hearing my classmates say these things in English, but I liked it. It felt like we were all sharing a little secret, speaking in a new language together. Miss Laura gave us a fun activity. She handed out cards with different questions, and we had to find a partner, ask them the question in English, and answer theirs. I was nervous, but I walked over to a girl named Anna and asked, "What's your favorite color?" She smiled and answered, "Blue." I felt a little silly, but we both laughed, and that helped ease the tension. Back at home, I decided to practice the phrases we learned. I found myself muttering, "Hello, my name is Lucy," while brushing my teeth, or "Nice to meet you," as I walked around my room. I even tried talking to my little brother in English. He laughed and had no idea what I was saying, but it made me feel good to practice. Throughout the week, I kept trying to use these phrases whenever I could. I'd go to the market and whisper hello to myself before entering. I even practiced saying, "How are you?" to my mom, just to get comfortable with it. Each time I said something in English, I felt a tiny bit more confident, even if it was just a single word. As the week ended, I reflected on how much I'd learned in just a few days. Before, I'd been too nervous to even say hello, but now I was introducing myself and asking simple questions. Sure, my sentences weren't perfect, and I stumbled over words, but I was starting to feel less afraid. I realized that learning English might be like building a house. One word at a time, brick by brick. This was only week 1, but I was already finding my voice, slowly but surely. Week 2. Exploring new word. Week 2 started, and I was both excited and nervous to see what we'd be learning. Miss Laura welcomed us with her usual warmth, and this week, she introduced us to something essential: vocabulary. "If you want to speak English, you need words," she said. Each new word is a tool that helps you say what you feel or think. It made sense, and I felt a bit like a carpenter collecting tools to build something great. Miss Laura began by teaching us simple nouns, like house, school, book, and friend. She held up pictures of each word and asked us to repeat after her. Then she moved on to verbs like run, eat, read, and sleep. I had heard some of these words before in movies or songs, but saying them myself was different. Speaking them out loud made me feel like I was truly owning them, as if each word was becoming a small part of me. We even learned some adjectives, like big, small, happy, and sad. Miss Laura explained that adjectives make sentences more colorful, like adding spices to a meal. I liked that comparison. The word happy sounded cheerful just saying it, and sad made me imagine a rainy day. Words are powerful, I thought. They create feelings just by how they sound. To help us remember, Miss Laura asked us to make flashcards for each word. She said that every time we saw the card, we should say the word out loud and use it in a sentence. I took this seriously, spending time at home making my flashcards look colorful and neat. On one side, I wrote the word in English, and on the other side, I drew a small picture or wrote the word in Spanish to remember its meaning. As I practiced, I realized I was already starting to build my own dictionary. Every time I used a new word, it felt like an accomplishment. I would go around my house, pointing at objects and saying their English names. Table, chair, door. My little brother laughed at me, but I didn't care. I was proud of my growing vocabulary. By the end of the week, we did a fun activity in class. Miss Laura asked us to write sentences using our new words. My sentences were simple. I read a book. My friend is happy. The house is big. They weren't complex, but each sentence felt like a little step forward. It was thrilling to put words together and see them make sense. That night, I looked through my flashcards again, going over each word and repeating it to myself. I felt like a traveler learning the names of new landmarks in a strange land. Vocabulary, I realized, is the foundation of every language. Without words, I couldn't build my sentences or express my thoughts. I thought back to what Miss Laura had said. Each word is a tool. By the end of week 2, I had gathered a small but useful collection of words. I was still nervous, but now I had some tools. My own set of words that I could use to start building sentences and conversations. It was only the beginning, but I felt ready to keep adding words to my collection, one tool at a time. Week 3. Basic conversation. It was week 3, and I could already feel myself getting a bit more comfortable in class. Miss Laura's smile always made us feel welcome, and I noticed that my classmates and I were starting to form a bond. We were all in this journey together, stumbling over words, laughing at our mistakes, and cheering each other on. This week, Miss Laura told us we would learn to have basic conversations in English. Things like introducing ourselves, asking simple questions, and responding. Today, she said, we'll learn how to ask and answer questions about each other. She wrote a few simple questions on the board. What's your favorite food? Do you have pets? Where do you live? As she explained each question, I felt a bit nervous. I'd never really had a conversation in English before, and the idea of asking and answering questions felt intimidating. But Miss Laura encouraged us to think of it as a friendly game, something fun. First, she showed us how to answer each question. My favorite food is pasta, she said, emphasizing each word. I have 2 cats, she added, and then she asked, what about you? One by one, we answered, each of us taking turns. I felt my cheeks flush when it was my turn. My favorite food is tacos, I said, and Miss Laura smiled and nodded as if I'd said something brilliant. That made me feel good, like I could do this. Next, Miss Laura paired us up with a partner to practice. I was paired with Carlos, a classmate who seemed as nervous as I was. We took turns asking each other questions from a list that Miss Laura provided. At first it felt awkward. I stumbled over words, and Carlos did too. But then, we relaxed a bit and started laughing at our mistakes. When he asked, what is your favorite animal? I quickly answered dog, without thinking too much. We were actually communicating, and it felt exciting. Throughout the week, I practiced these questions and answers at home. I found myself saying them out loud, like, where do you live? Or what's your favorite color? I even tried practicing with my mom. She doesn't speak any English, but she was happy to listen and laugh at my attempts. Practicing with her was actually fun. It made me feel less self-conscious and more willing to try. By the end of the week, we had a small conversation practice activity in class. Miss Laura set up stations around the room, each with a question. We had to go from station to station, asking and answering the questions with different classmates. It was a little bit like speed dating, except we were practicing English. Do you like music? I asked one classmate, feeling more confident than I had before. Yes, I like pop music, she replied. It felt amazing to have a real conversation, even if it was short and simple. Reflecting on this week, I realized that conversations don't have to be perfect. They just have to be understood. I'd been so scared of making mistakes, but now I understood that the key to speaking English was just trying, even if my words weren't perfect. Each time I tried, I felt myself growing a little more comfortable and confident. As I left class at the end of the week, I knew that speaking English would still be a challenge, but now I felt a little braver. I was no longer just learning words. I was learning how to connect with people. And for the first time, I started to believe that I could really do this. Week 4. Learning pronunciation. This week, Miss Laura introduced us to something that had always felt like one of the biggest obstacles to learning English. Pronunciation. I'd hear English words in movies or songs and wonder how they could sound so smooth, so natural. But every time I tried saying them, they seemed to twist up in my mouth. It was like my tongue wasn't built for English sounds. Pronunciation is challenging, Miss Laura admitted, as if reading my mind. But with practice, you'll get better. Don't worry about sounding perfect. Just focus on being understood. That was a relief. I'd been so worried about sounding right that I hadn't even allowed myself to try out loud much. She started with some basics, like common sounds that don't exist in Spanish, like the English th. She demonstrated it carefully, exaggerating the way she placed her tongue between her teeth and letting the sound escape slowly. Think of it as a gentle sound, she said. We all tried to copy her, some of us laughing when it didn't come out quite right. When it was my turn, I managed to get it after a few tries. It felt strange, but also like a little victory. Next, she introduced us to some fun exercises, like tongue twisters. These help stretch your mouth and get you used to saying difficult sounds, she explained. She wrote a simple one on the board. She sells seashells by the seashore. It looked innocent enough, but the moment I tried to say it, my tongue got all tangled up. We all burst into laughter as we tried and failed, over and over again. But the laughter helped. It made me feel less embarrassed and more willing to keep trying. At home, I kept practicing the th sound, repeating words like think, thanks, and 3 until they started to feel a little more natural. I'd stand in front of the mirror, watching the way my mouth moved and whispering the sounds to myself. It still felt awkward, but each day it seemed to get a bit easier. Miss Laura also encouraged us to listen to English outside of class. Find a short video or a song and try repeating the words, she suggested. So that night, I looked up a simple English song with lyrics. I picked one with slow, clear words, something I could follow along with. I played it over and over, singing along until I started to pick up on the pronunciation. It wasn't perfect, but I could feel myself improving, one word at a time. By the end of the week, we did a small activity where each of us had to say a sentence with tricky sounds. My sentence was, "The three friends ate thick bread." I felt nervous as I stood up to say it, but to my surprise, I got through it without stumbling. My classmates clapped, and Miss Laura gave me a proud smile. It felt amazing to have that support, and for the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed about speaking English. I felt proud. Reflecting on this week, I realized that pronunciation isn't something that happens overnight. It's like learning to dance. The steps feel strange at first, but with practice, they become natural. I still have a lot to learn, but now I'm starting to enjoy the process. English doesn't feel like a scary language anymore. It feels like a challenge that I can tackle, bit by bit. And with each word I pronounce, I'm one step closer to speaking confidently. Week 5. Talking about daily routine. This week, Miss Laura introduced us to something practical and fun. Talking about our daily routines. She explained that describing our daily activities is one of the best ways to practice speaking, as we already know the actions. We just need to find the words. As soon as she mentioned it, I felt a bit excited. I could picture myself describing my whole day in English, like I was narrating my life. We started with simple sentences. Miss Laura wrote examples on the board, like, I wake up at 7 a.m. and I go to school. She explained that the key to describing routines is to use the present tense, and she encouraged us to keep things simple. We all took turns saying one thing we do each day. I have breakfast at 8, I said, feeling proud that I could contribute. To help us get used to talking about routines, Miss Laura assigned each of us to write down our daily schedule in English. She said, think of it like a diary entry, but in English. That night, I went home and sat down with my notebook. I started with the basics. I wake up at 7 a.m. I brush my teeth. I have breakfast. As I wrote, I noticed myself getting more creative, adding details like I walk to class or I study in the library. The next day, Miss Laura split us into pairs to practice our routines with each other. My partner, Anna, and I took turns describing our days. We stumbled a bit, but it was fun hearing how similar our routines were. I get up at 7, Anna said, and I replied, me too. It made me feel connected, like English was helping us share parts of our lives. Miss Laura also taught us some time phrases to add more detail. We learned words like in the morning, in the afternoon, and at night. She showed us how to use these in our sentences. I study in the morning, or I relax at night. It seemed simple, but these small phrases added a lot to our sentences, making them sound more complete. To keep practicing, I decided to challenge myself at home. Every night before bed, I'd stand in front of the mirror and describe my entire day in English. I woke up at 7. I went to class. I studied in the library. It was a bit strange talking to myself, but it felt good to use English like this. With each day, I felt myself getting more confident, and the words started flowing more naturally. By the end of the week, Miss Laura had us present our routines to the class. It was a bit nerve-wracking, but I managed to get through my day without freezing up. I wake up at 7, I began, feeling my confidence grow as I moved on to the next part. I stumbled a little but kept going, and when I finished, my classmates clapped. It felt great knowing I could talk about something as simple as my daily routine in another language. Reflecting on this week, I realized that learning English doesn't always have to be complicated. Sometimes the best way to practice is by using simple sentences about our everyday lives. Talking about my routine in English gave me a sense of accomplishment, and I started feeling more comfortable with the language. Week by week, I could feel myself getting closer to being able to speak English naturally. And this was just one more step in that journey. Week 6. Describing people and places. In week 6, Miss Laura introduced us to the art of describing people and places. She said, being able to describe what you see around you is a big part of communicating in English. I like the idea of learning how to talk about people I admire, places I visit, or even my hometown. Describing things felt like a step forward from just talking about routines. Now I could make my conversations more interesting and detailed. We started with adjectives for people, like tall, short, kind, friendly, and funny. Miss Laura asked us to describe someone we knew using these words. I thought of my little brother, who is short and funny, and my mom, who is kind and friendly. As I described them in English, it felt special, like I was sharing a little piece of my life with my classmates. Hearing everyone describe their family members and friends made me feel connected to them, even though we were all still learning the language. Next, we moved on to describing places. Miss Laura showed us how to use adjectives like big, small, beautiful, noisy, and quiet. She encouraged us to think of places we knew well, like our homes, schools, or favorite spots in town. For me, I immediately thought of the park in my hometown. It's a beautiful, quiet place where I like to read and relax. I practiced saying, the park is beautiful and peaceful. There are tall trees and colorful flowers. It felt satisfying to describe a place that I loved in English. To help us practice, Miss Laura asked us to create a short description of a place we enjoy visiting. I chose the small cafe near my university where I often study. I wrote, the cafe is small but cozy. It has soft chairs and nice music. I like to go there to study. Putting it all together made me feel like I was truly starting to express myself in English. I didn't just know words. I could now use them to describe things that mattered to me. Miss Laura then organized a class activity where we paired up and described someone or something to each other. My partner was Carlos, and he described his best friend, saying, he is tall and very funny. He likes to tell jokes. I described my brother, saying, he is short and very energetic. We laughed as we realized we both knew someone who was funny, and it felt nice to share these personal details in English. At home, I decided to challenge myself to describe other things around me. I described my bedroom as small but comfortable, my school as big and busy, and my favorite book as exciting and interesting. I even tried describing my town, calling it small but friendly. Each time I practiced, it felt like I was building my own English world, piece by piece. By the end of the week, we had a show and tell session in class. Miss Laura asked us to bring an item or a picture of a place we liked, and we each took turns describing it. I brought a photo of the park in my town and said, "This is my favorite place. It is quiet and beautiful. I go there to relax." It wasn't a long description, but Miss Laura clapped proudly when I finished, and I felt proud too. Reflecting on this week, I realized how much describing things had helped me gain confidence. Now I could use English to share my world, my family, my favorite places, the things that make me happy. It made the language feel more personal, more like a part of me. I wasn't just speaking English. I was sharing my story in English. And that was a powerful feeling. Week 7. Talking about hobbies and interest. This week, Miss Laura announced that we would be learning how to talk about hobbies and interests. I felt a spark of excitement. I had so many interests, and the idea of being able to talk about them in English made me feel like I could finally share a bit more of my personality. We started with a list of common hobbies: reading, playing sports, listening to music, cooking, and drawing. Miss Laura wrote these on the board and explained that hobbies are a great way to connect with people. If you can talk about your hobbies, you'll have something to share when you meet new friends or practice English with others, she said. It made sense. I'd always felt that hobbies were a big part of who I was, and I wanted to be able to express that in English. She asked us to think about our favorite hobbies and write down a few sentences describing them. My favorite hobby is reading, so I wrote, "I like reading. I read books every night. My favorite books are mysteries." I felt proud of these sentences, even though they were simple. It felt like I was starting to create a picture of myself in English. Then, Miss Laura introduced a few phrases to help us talk about why we enjoy our hobbies. She taught us phrases like, "It makes me feel happy," "It helps me relax," and "It is fun." I added a sentence to my description. "Reading makes me feel happy and relaxed." Suddenly, my sentences felt more complete, like they were telling a little story. To help us practice, Miss Laura paired us up again. My partner this time was Anna, and she told me about her hobby, which was painting. "I like painting," she said. "It is fun. I paint on weekends." I loved hearing her talk about it, and I shared how I enjoyed reading because it helped me escape into new worlds. We laughed, realizing that although our hobbies were different, we both used them to relax and have fun. At home, I decided to practice by describing some other things I liked. I wrote down sentences about listening to music, saying, "I like listening to music. My favorite music is pop. It makes me feel happy." I even tried talking about my love for cooking with my mom. I told her in English, "I like cooking. It is fun, and I like to make tacos." She smiled and gave me a thumbs up, even though she didn't fully understand. Practicing like this made me realize how much I wanted to share my interests with others. By the end of the week, we had a class activity called Hobby Day. Miss Laura asked each of us to prepare a short presentation about our favorite hobby. I practiced a lot at home, wanting to make sure I could get through my sentences without stumbling. When it was my turn, I stood up and shared, "My hobby is reading. I read every day. I like mystery books. Reading makes me feel happy and relaxed." The words came out more easily than I expected, and when I finished, my classmates clapped. It felt amazing to be able to share something about myself in English. Reflecting on this week, I realized how much I enjoyed being able to express my interests. Talking about hobbies didn't feel like a language exercise. It felt like real communication. I wasn't just learning English. I was using it to tell people about things that mattered to me. Little by little, I was starting to feel more like myself in English, and that made me feel more confident, more connected. English was becoming a way for me to share my story with the world, one sentence at a time. Week 8. Expressing feelings and emotion. This week, Miss Laura introduced us to a topic I'd been waiting for. Expressing feelings and emotions. I often struggled with explaining how I felt in English, and it would always make me hesitate, worried that I'd pick the wrong word. But Miss Laura said, when you can talk about your emotions, you can connect with others more deeply. That resonated with me. I wanted to be able to tell people when I was happy, nervous, excited, or even a bit homesick, and I was ready to learn how. We started with simple emotions. Happy, sad, angry, scared, excited, and tired. Miss Laura had us repeat each word and then showed us how to use them in sentences. She said, when you talk about your feelings, you can start with I feel, or I am. She gave us examples like, I feel happy, or I am tired. It was straightforward, but even this small change made me feel like I was beginning to find my emotional voice in English. Next, Miss Laura showed us how to combine emotions with reasons. For instance, I feel happy because I finished my homework, or I am tired because I worked late. This made our sentences feel more real and personal. I practiced saying, I feel excited because I am learning English, and even though it was a simple sentence, it felt powerful to say. I was telling the truth, and for the first time, English felt like a way for me to express what was in my heart. We practiced in pairs, and this time, I was paired with Carlos. We took turns sharing how we felt that day. Carlos said, I feel nervous because I have a test tomorrow, and I told him, I feel happy because I am learning English. Saying it out loud to someone else felt different, more genuine. I liked hearing about Carlos's emotions, too. It reminded me that we all go through ups and downs, and knowing the words to express them can make those moments easier. At home, I practiced by writing down my emotions at the end of each day. I'd jot down sentences like, I felt proud because I practiced English, or I felt tired because I stayed up late. This little exercise became a habit, and it was surprising how much it helped me. I even started saying these sentences to myself in the mirror, like, I feel nervous because I have a presentation, or I am excited because the weekend is near. It felt strange at first, but gradually, it became more comfortable. By the end of the week, Miss Laura asked us to think about a memorable experience and how it made us feel. She encouraged us to write a few sentences and share them with the class. I decided to talk about the first day of our English class. I felt nervous at first, I wrote, but then I felt happy because everyone was friendly. When it was my turn to share, I read my sentences aloud. Speaking about my emotions in front of the class was challenging, but it felt good to be open. My classmates nodded, and some even shared similar feelings from that first day. Reflecting on this week, I realized that learning to express my emotions in English was about more than just language. It was about connection. Knowing how to say I feel happy or I feel nervous made me feel like I could share more of myself with others. English was no longer just a set of words and rules. It was becoming a tool to show who I really am. Week by week I was finding my voice, and that voice was starting to feel a little more confident, a little more real. This journey wasn't just about learning English anymore. It was about becoming braver, step by step. Week 9. Talking about the past. This week, we took on a big challenge. Learning how to talk about past events. Until now, most of what we'd learned focused on the present, like describing routines and talking about hobbies. But Miss Laura explained that to tell stories and share memories, we'd need to use the past tense. This was exciting, but also a little intimidating. I was eager to talk about memories in English, but the rules felt unfamiliar. We started with simple verbs and learned how they change in the past tense. Miss Laura gave us a list of common verbs, like go, see, do, and have, and explained their past forms. For example, go becomes went, see becomes saw, and have becomes had. As she wrote these on the board, I realized I already knew some of them from listening to English movies and songs, but seeing them in a list helped me understand the pattern. We practiced using these past tense verbs in short sentences. Yesterday, I went to the park, Miss Laura said as an example. Last week, I saw a movie. She encouraged us to keep our sentences simple and think of recent events we could describe. I thought about what I did over the weekend and tried saying, I visited my friend on Saturday, and I watched a movie. It felt great to be able to talk about things that had already happened, as if I was opening a new door in English. Miss Laura also explained the importance of time phrases like yesterday, last week, last year, and ago. These words helped anchor our sentences in the past. She encouraged us to use them to add context to our stories. For example, instead of just saying, I went to the park, we could say, last Sunday, I went to the park. These little additions made our sentences feel more complete and easier to follow. Then came the fun part. We each had to share a memory with a partner. I paired up with Anna, and we took turns telling each other something that happened recently. I told her about a family gathering last month, saying, last month, my family came together for a celebration. We had dinner, and I talked with my cousins. Anna shared that she had visited a museum last weekend, and I loved hearing her story. We both stumbled a little over the verbs, but we helped each other, laughing at our mistakes and trying again. At home, I practiced by writing down little memories in my notebook. I wrote sentences like, 2 weeks ago, I went to the beach. And yesterday, I made dinner for my family. I also tried talking about past events out loud to myself, imagining that I was telling a friend. Last summer, I traveled with my family, I'd say. Practicing like this made the past tense start to feel more natural, less like a list of rules and more like a way to tell stories. By the end of the week, Miss Laura asked us each to share a short story about a happy memory with the class. I decided to talk about a family trip from last year. Last year, my family and I went to the mountains. We stayed in a cabin. We had a campfire and told stories, I said. It wasn't a long story, but it felt meaningful to share something personal in English. My classmates smiled and I felt proud. Reflecting on this week, I realized that learning the past tense opened up a new world for me. I could now tell people about experiences and memories, not just what I was doing in the present. English was becoming more than just practical sentences. It was starting to feel like a way to share who I was, including the moments that made me happy, excited, or even a little nostalgic. Talking about the past helped me feel more connected to others, and step by step, I felt like my confidence was growing. I was beginning to believe that I could really speak English, not just in the present, but in all the ways that matter. Week 10. Talking about future plan. This week, Miss Laura introduced us to talking about the future, and I felt a new excitement brewing. She explained that learning to express future plans is important because it lets us share our dreams and goals. The idea of discussing my future in English felt both inspiring and a little daunting, but I was eager to try. I wanted to be able to talk about my hopes and ambitions with confidence. Miss Laura began by teaching us simple phrases for talking about future plans, like I will, I am going to, and I plan to. She explained that I will is often used for things we decide at the moment, while I am going to is for plans we've already thought about. This distinction was new to me, but she gave examples that made it easier to understand. For instance, I will visit my friend this weekend, versus I am going to start a new hobby next month. We practiced with small, everyday examples first. Miss Laura asked us what we were going to do after class, and I said, I am going to study English. We laughed as she asked other students, who replied with answers like, I will go home, or I am going to watch a movie. It was a simple activity, but it made the future tense feel more approachable. As we got more comfortable, Miss Laura asked us to think bigger and talk about our long-term goals. I hesitated at first. My dreams felt almost too personal to share. But Miss Laura encouraged us to imagine ourselves in the future, even if it felt challenging. Don't worry if it's difficult, she said. This is about sharing your hopes, even if they're just dreams for now. I decided to start small and wrote down a few sentences. I am going to finish my studies, I wrote. I want to travel and visit other countries. As I wrote, I felt a thrill at the idea of saying these dreams out loud. I wanted to be able to talk about my future in English, as if speaking it could make it real. We practiced in pairs, and this time my partner was Carlos. I told him, I am going to learn English well, and I want to get a good job. Carlos shared his dream of starting his own business, and we talked about the places we both wanted to visit someday. It was inspiring to hear his plans, and I felt a little braver sharing mine. At home, I decided to push myself by writing about my future in more detail. I practiced sentences like, one day, I will travel to Europe, and I am going to learn new skills for my career. I even practiced imagining my life 5 years from now, trying to say, in 5 years, I hope to speak English fluently and work in a good company. Speaking about my dreams in English made them feel closer somehow, as if practicing the words could bring them to life. By the end of the week, Miss Laura asked us to each share one future goal with the class. I decided to go for it and said, I am going to improve my English, and one day I want to travel. The words felt simple, but my classmates clapped, and Miss Laura smiled proudly. I felt a new spark of confidence as I stood there, realizing that English was now a tool I could use to imagine and build my future. Reflecting on this week, I felt something shift. I realized that English wasn't just a language for my current needs. It was also a way to express my dreams and hopes. Talking about my future made English feel limitless, like a bridge that could help me reach anything I set my mind to. Week by week, English was becoming more than just words. It was a language of possibility, helping me see a world that I was now ready to step into, one dream at a time. Week 11. Sharing opinions and giving reason. As we entered the 11th week, Miss Laura told us that we would be learning how to share opinions and give reasons. This felt like a big step. Up until now, we'd mostly practiced describing things, talking about routines, and sharing memories. But giving an opinion meant expressing what I thought and felt about things, and that was both exciting and a little scary. I wanted to be able to explain why I liked or disliked something, to make my voice heard in English. We began with some simple opinion phrases. I think, I believe, and in my opinion. Miss Laura showed us how we could start sentences with these phrases to express our point of view. For example, I think reading is important. Or in my opinion, learning languages is fun. These examples sounded so natural, and I realized that learning these phrases was like unlocking a new part of my personality in English. I could finally start expressing not just what I did, but what I believed. Then, we learned how to add reasons to support our opinions. Miss Laura explained that giving reasons helps people understand why we feel a certain way, and she taught us simple connectors like because and so. For instance, I think reading is important because it helps me learn new things. Or in my opinion, exercising is good because it makes me feel healthy. I started feeling more confident as I realized that I could now build sentences that were meaningful, showing both my opinion and my reasoning. To practice, Miss Laura organized a small debate activity. She split the class into 2 groups and gave us a simple topic. Is it better to study in the morning or at night? I was assigned to the morning team. I thought about why studying in the morning might be better and wrote down. I think studying in the morning is better because my mind is fresh. When it was my turn to speak, I said, in my opinion, studying in the morning is good because we can focus more. My classmates nodded, and even though my argument was simple, I felt proud to express my viewpoint. After that, we practiced giving opinions on lighter topics. Miss Laura asked us what our favorite food was and why. I said, I think tacos are the best because they are tasty and easy to make. Then we moved on to topics like favorite movies, music, and hobbies. As I practiced, I realized that giving my opinion didn't have to be intimidating. It was just about sharing my perspective, and the more I tried, the easier it felt. At home, I continued practicing by giving my opinion on everything I could think of. I'd say, I think this show is funny because it makes me laugh. Or I believe this book is interesting because the story is exciting. I even started expressing my thoughts in English to my family, like telling my mom, I think cooking is fun because it is creative. Even though my family didn't always understand, it helped me grow more comfortable with expressing myself in English. By the end of the week, Miss Laura asked each of us to stand up and share an opinion on any topic we liked. I decided to talk about the importance of learning English. I said, in my opinion, Learning English is important because it helps us connect with more people. The words felt genuine, and as I looked around, I saw my classmates nodding in agreement. It felt empowering to share something I truly believed, and to see others understand and respect my viewpoint. Reflecting on this week, I felt a new sense of confidence. Expressing my opinions in English wasn't just about practicing words. It was about making my voice heard, showing who I am and what I believe. This week, I felt like English was helping me grow not just as a language learner, but as a person who could stand up and share their ideas. Little by little, English was becoming more than just a skill. It was becoming a way for me to connect, to express, and to understand the world around me. Week 12. Reflecting on the journey and setting new goal. Here we were, the last week of our 12-week English journey. Miss Laura greeted us with a warm smile, sensing our mixed emotions. There was pride and excitement in the room, but also a little sadness that our weekly classes together were coming to an end. She told us that this week, we'd be reflecting on what we'd learned, celebrating our progress, and setting new goals for the future. I couldn't believe how far I'd come. Just 3 months ago, expressing even a simple thought in English felt overwhelming. Now, I felt like a new version of myself. Someone who could talk about hopes, dreams, memories, and opinions in English. We started with reflection. Miss Laura asked each of us to think back to our first week and write down the biggest challenges we'd faced, and how we'd overcome them. I remembered my initial nerves and self-doubt. I had been scared of making mistakes, worried about my accent, and embarrassed to speak up. But looking back, I realized that those fears had slowly faded away with each week. I'd learned that making mistakes was part of the process, and every time I tried, I got a little better. Writing down these thoughts felt emotional. I was proud of myself for not giving up. Next, we shared our favorite moments from the course. Many students talked about fun activities, like our hobby day and the little debates we'd had. My favorite moment was the first time I'd shared my family trip story using the past tense. I remembered the pride I felt when my classmates understood me and responded with smiles. That moment had been a turning point. It was when I realized that English was not just a class but a bridge to connect with others. Then, Miss Laura asked us to think about the skills we'd developed. I realized how much I could now express. I could introduce myself, talk about my family, share my opinions, and describe past events. I had also learned to talk about the future and even express my emotions. Miss Laura encouraged us to keep practicing these skills, reminding us that language learning is a journey that never really ends. This made me feel excited. It was as if this class was just the beginning. Finally, Miss Laura asked us to set new goals for ourselves. She said, "Think about where you want to go next with English." I took a deep breath and thought about the dreams I'd shared earlier. I wanted to keep improving, to become even more fluent, and to eventually use English in my career. I wrote down 3 goals: read an English novel, have a conversation with a native speaker, and write a short story in English. These goals felt ambitious but also exciting, like stepping stones to a new future. As our final activity, we each shared our goals with the class. I stood up and said, "My goal is to read a book in English." My classmates cheered, and I felt a surge of motivation. Hearing everyone else's goals was inspiring, too. We were all eager to keep learning, even though the class was ending. Miss Laura ended the lesson with a reminder. Learning a language is not about perfection. It's about progress. She told us how proud she was of each of us, and that no matter where we went next, we should always remember how far we'd come. I felt a wave of gratitude for her guidance, for my classmates, and for the journey we'd shared. Walking out of the classroom that day, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. I'd started this course with fear and hesitation, but I was leaving with confidence, excitement, and a sense of possibility. English wasn't just a subject anymore. It was a part of me, a tool I could use to grow, connect, and dream bigger than ever before. As I set out to achieve my new goals, I knew I'd carry the lessons of these 12 weeks with me, wherever life might take me. As I left the classroom for the last time, I glanced back with a smile, knowing that this wasn't really an end, but a beginning. English had become more than words. It was a key to new opportunities and friendships. With every step, I carried with me the courage, confidence, and excitement these 12 weeks had given me. I was ready to keep learning, to keep growing, and, most importantly, to keep speaking up in this new language that was now truly a part of me.